Hello and welcome to the 68th gathering of the Adventure Party on this, the 19th of February. I am your party leader, Brad Ludwig. We ask that you peace tie your swords, holster your blasters, and make sure you wore your brown trousers while you are gathered at the meeting table. So Glenn introduced us to 10 Candles, which if you haven't heard that was the previous meeting, wasn't it, Glenn?
Two back.
You're right. 2 meetings ago. And we both kind of lost our freaking minds. And I said to Glenn, "Oh, we got to talk to this man." And he has been gracious enough to join us. He is Stephen Dewey, and he is the creator of 10 Candles. And we talked a bit about it, but just to kind of get you back up to speed, it's a tragic horror RPG. And the main thing that you need to know going into this game, you're going to die. Flat out. And this game is about how you live your last few hours of life during this apocalypse. The rules are, as I like to say, elegant in their simplicity. Setup of the characters is very, very quick, very easy to do. You write out your bits on index cards, and you're off. So, like the next day after we talked about 10 Candles, I ordered a copy, and the rules, Stephen, are what, about 30 pages?
Well, the full rule book is, I think, just under 100, but when you're actually getting down to the nitty-gritty mechanical bits, probably about 30 pages in there.
Okay. And like I haven't seen a game like this ever. And I think that the only thing that, because it's narrative focused, there's really very little dice rolling, it seems, in the game. And everybody basically has a stake in creating this story. I mean, quite literally. But as you go,
it's a very collaborative storytelling experience, definitely.
Absolutely. And I was thinking the only thing that I can think of remotely that comes close to that is like the Extraordinary Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which it's kind of similar. I don't know if you've ever heard of the game or ever played it. It kind of seemed a little bit like that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
There's definitely a lot of threads between 10 Candles and other indie narrative-based storytelling games. Definitely Extraordinary Adventures being one of them. There's a whole lot of games I sort of have experience with and pulled inspiration from to kind of lead to 10 Candles. But it's the way it tells stories, I think, is new and interesting, certainly. And there's definitely a lot of that very free-form storytelling that you'll see in games like that.
Yeah, and I just was totally knocked out. And I'm so glad that you've been able to take some time to talk with us. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here.
Our second in command here is Glenn Bittner. He is a movie reviewer with his YouTube show, The B-Movie Bunker, and he's also created his own RPG called Mistrunner. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Brad. Thank you.
I'm not buying it. That was very low key. You took a second or two.
Really casual.
Very sedate as well.
Let's do this. Let's do it.
Now I got wrestler voice. All right, it's on. As always, we do a roundtable discussion throughout the podcast with our guest, Stephen Dewey. We're going to do Glenn's game review, do a little bit of gaming news, and then we're going to talk in depth with Stephen Dewey about 10 Candles. So let's start it off, Glenn. What game do you have for us this week?
I brought one that I got to play once and then immediately bought the game and have played like 4 times since. This is Black Orchestra. Brought to us from Game Salute. It's for 1 to 5 players. Runs 45 minutes would be a quick game. It's more like 75 minutes to an hour and a half. Created by Philip Dewey, who also did the game Revolution from Steve Jackson Games. But In this one, this takes place as Hitler is slowly rising to power in Germany, and all the players play cooperatively as conspirators, trying to basically eliminate Hitler.
Okay.
So, of course, while you're doing this, I mean, the Gestapo is constantly on your trail. So everything you do can increase your suspicion. And the Gestapo makes routine sweeps. And if you have high enough suspicion, you can be arrested. You can be interrogated. And sometimes when you're interrogated, that will lead to other players being arrested. It's just so awesome. What was I going to say? Yeah, every time you get suspicion, the whole plot can be detected, and then everything is just a mess, and you lose. Basically, how a turn works is on your turn you can take 3 actions. You're guaranteed 3 actions if you want them. So you can move around in the areas of Germany and stuff like that, from city to city. You can search for an item, which every city has an item on it that you can take, which will usually help you in some other way at some other point in the game. You can draw cards. There are different cards that let you give different plots or possibly different benefits you can use later. Or you can even do an action to roll dice and attempt to gain more actions. However, rolling the dice, that can give you more actions, or it can also raise your suspicion. So it's kind of a risk, but I mean, sometimes it's worth the risk, because sometimes, oh, look, I rolled so well. I don't have 3 actions this turn. I have 9.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, you can get there's a possibility to get lots of actions, but there's also possibilities to build lots of suspicion on your turn. So you have to take it all on what you feel like you have to get done versus what you can get away with doing. If I get away with only 3 actions, sometimes that's a smart way to go, because you don't want to raise that suspicion, because you're going through a series of decks for drawing out cards of things that actually happen. And these are all historically things that happen. So, I mean, you're going to have, Crystal Knock, and you're going to have the invasion of the Rhineland, and all this stuff that happens that really happened. And these will all change what's happening in the game. And Hitler's military influence keeps growing throughout the game. And you want to do things to lower that, because the higher his military influence, the harder it is for you to succeed in your plot.
Okay,
because
sure.
he's got that many people basically who are protecting him. It's you get plot cards, which are different things you can try to do to either assassinate or kidnap Hitler, and those usually require you being in specific areas. And it's hard because Hitler, and then you've got you have Himmler and Goebbels and all of his little cronies who are moving on the map. And if you ever end your turn on a space with any of them, bad things can happen.
Yeah.
Because if you're a conspirator, hanging out with Himmler is not the best thing to be doing.
You're probably not guaranteed a long life. And for those of you who are listening, you can always take a look at our YouTube episode on the Galactic Netcast's channel, because I'm flipping through what the board looks like, what the pieces look like from BoardGameGeek.com. So I'm sorry. Continue, Glenn.
Yeah. So it's just I love it because it's really hard. It really is definitely a hard game to win. And the first time I played it, we actually, it was great because you can actually have a little card that you can hold up and take a picture and tweet it out with the tagline "We killed Hitler."
Yeah, I just flipped through that card, and it's awesome.
And we pulled it off on the we had this was like we might have 1, maybe 2 player turns left. Two of my teammates, or my 2 teammates, had already been arrested. They had just gotten out of jail, but their suspicion was way back up. Mine was to the point where if there had been another Gestapo raid, I would have gone to jail. And when you go to prison, you lose all your cool stuff that you've collected. So I had to do this. If you have more people with you when you try to do the plot, you get to roll more dice. But I couldn't get them to me fast enough, and I had Hitler where I needed him to be, so I just stepped in and said, I'm going to try this on my own. And I cashed in every card I had, and which some of them gave, I had some items that gave me extra dice, I had some cards that gave me some extra dice, and I rolled these dice, and you have to roll a certain number of eagles to succeed.
Okay.
But every suspicion you do is bad. And I rolled 2 suspicion, which was the most. If I rolled more than 1, I was going to go to prison, and I rolled 2. And then we were 1 eagle short, and I'm like, oh. And then we're like, wait, we have a re-roll 1 suspicion. So I had 1 shot, and I picked it up and I rolled it, and it landed with an eagle.
Oh,
and
wow!
It's just like boom. We just killed her. It was actually me. Well, with help from my teammates because they did lots of stuff to help me get where I was. So it wasn't just me. It's just at the moment it was just me. And then I'm sure a room full of Hitler sympathizers probably murdered me right after. But
probably.
But yeah, it's just a great game because there's so much. I'm not used to in a board game there being. There's always there can be that little bit of tenses, but there's just so much suspense because everything just keeps building and building and building, and the fact that this is tied to things that anyone who's studied any world history as far as the World War II goes, you see all these things happening, and you can figure out, okay, well, this has happened now. I know this is going to be coming up, and then this is going to be coming up. You're going to have Auschwitz is going to be opening up, and they're going to start doing this stuff, and as things build. Historically, these things are happening, and the game is coming closer and closer to an end. It's not like some fictional world where it's like, the Zadaran Republic solidified their frontier. It's like, no, these things that are happening because you study them in school, or you read about them, or you ever watched the History Channel longer than half hour. And
that must help to kind of build the tension in the game.
Helps build the tension so much because you can see the end game approaching as that's happening. If you haven't already lost before that, which happened the second time we played, where we were the worst conspirators ever. It's like we were walking around it's like we were walking in rooms going, "Hey, anyone want to help me kill Hitler?" Because our suspicion just skyrocketed. We all ended up in prison. If you all end up in jail, you lose. So yeah, it's like, oh well, yeah, we were pretty bad at that. So I've played it I think 5 times now. I've won twice.
Oh wow! So kind of like Samurai Spirit difficult almost.
Yeah, about like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And it just and sometimes it's just, and the big difference here is there's luck of dice, which I know some people don't like, but I think that in some games I think the luck of the dice fits in with the theme because of the fact that, if you look at actual history, Hitler had some serious luck on his side at times where it's like, oh, we're going to send off this bomb. Oh, look at that. The table was so thick, it protected people.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's little things like that where it's like the luck of the dice is kind of happening. And it kind of fits if you've ever watched like any type of conspiracy movies where it's like we're all good and, oh, that guard isn't supposed to be there. It's those little things that kind of add to it. So I think it works well with having that luck of the dice along with the strategy because you can minimize some of that. Like I said, you can choose not to roll dice on your turn and just take your 3 actions, or planning out where you're moving. So it's like, well, do I want to be, I know I don't want to end up where Goebbels is, but do I want to be in the city next to him? Or areas that there are some areas that that they like to hang out in. Well, I don't want to hang out here because this is like where Hitler goes to chill, and listen to whatever he listens to. So you have to plan lots of stuff out, and you really have to coordinate with the other players because you don't want to all be in the same spot most of the time. Sometimes you want to be because you have to trade things.
Oh, okay.
But you don't want to both be stuck in the city. Then also, and then Himmler comes over. It's like, well, now both of us are hoes when our turn starts, unless one person can get Himmler to move on their turn. But even still, it's like you don't want to be caught all together. This isn't like the Harry Potter movies. The bad guys can't all hang out in one house and expect nothing to happen. And in this case, as far as Nazis are concerned, we were the bad guys because we're the conspirators, we're the anti-government people. But yeah, it's such a cool game.
Nice. Stephen, we know that you're an RPG person. How about board games?
Oh yeah.
I'm a big fan of board games. I have a passion for pretty much all kinds of gaming. I'm particularly a big fan of board games if you've sort of got a night when you don't really have the time or the energy to sit down for a full RPG. It's nice to be able to sort of we sort of have this boxed experience up on the shelf that we can sort of just pull down and launch into a half hour, 45-minute, 2-hour game. So yeah, I'm a big fan of board games.
Awesome. Does this sound like something that you would be into?
Quite possibly. In most games I'm looking at, whether it's as a designer or games that I'm sitting down to play, a lot of what I'm particularly interested in with games is sort of emotional design in gaming. So if a game is actually designed in a way to create or elicit emotions of some kinds, or it sort of puts you through some kind of emotional experience while you're playing it, I'm much more likely to be engaged with it, as opposed to just sort of sitting back and playing like an abstract game, which I might not have as much of an investment in. So hearing the review of Black Orchestra, right, that sounds like something that's right at my alley, because you have built into the mechanics of that game a lot of these emotional triggers, a lot of these moments where the tension's going to be really high. Every single action you take might be paired with sort of a tough decision or a really high risk that you might get uncovered, or suspicion might fall on you, any of these other sort of mechanics. So that's fascinating to me. I like seeing games that incorporate that in some way. And I think with a lot of cooperative games, that's sometimes a little easier to do, or a little more maybe effective or evocative to do, because you're sort of on a team with your friends, and you're out to get some kind of unseen force, being the game, that you don't really have any effect over. It's not like you're lying to your friends or going up against them. It's just like this uncontrollable force of a board game that you're trying to outsmart or outwit, but inevitably something might twist and turn against you. So I love that sort of stuff. So this sounds right up my alley.
Nice. Now, about what does this retail at, Glenn?
It's about $65.
Okay. Well, looking at it, I don't think that I would feel bad at all spending $65 on a game that is truly, I don't want to say truly unique, but it is unique in its structure, in that tension and timeline and everything is built into it. And it feels like there is definitely a driving force to keep moving you forward and, coordinate with everybody and try to take out, Hitler and everybody else involved in the game.
It doesn't really seem to me like, it didn't remind me while you were talking about it of any other real game system or board game sort of structure that I'm familiar with. Like a lot of games on my shelf, I sort of look and I'm like, okay, well, we can play Pandemic, or we can play Pandemic Legacy, or Pandemic Iberia, or Forbidden Island, or Forbidden Desert, or Burgle Brothers, and they're all kind of the same thing, but it's just about what flavor we want. But so I'm always interested in games that are sort of like, well, this doesn't really sound like anything else on my shelf. In some way, maybe I missed something, or maybe I don't have a game that I've played before that this is sort of built on. But has this sort of game system? Have you guys seen this in other board games or something similar?
I was kind of thinking about what is it, Whitechapel, where it's kind of structured around the letters that Jack the Ripper leaves. So you have a certain amount of time that you have to get. You have to try to catch Jack the Ripper, but it's very hard to do.
Yeah, well, and and Letters from Whitechapel in turn based on Fury of Dracula. So there is that sort of element.
Okay.
I mean, so yeah, I guess that could probably be the closest thing here. But this though is a fully cooperative game, as opposed to those which are that asymmetrical sort of competitive.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's some similarities to other games, but I mean, there's a lot going on here that I think it's hard to estimate that's completely unique to a game these days because there's so many games out now.
Yeah.
But I love the conspiring action. There's other games that have used this thing where you can roll dice to try to do more things, but there's penalties.
Sure.
And I screwed up before where I said how I had to roll one more eagle at the end. It's targets, not eagles. Eagles are the bad thing because that the German eagle was there. That's bad. So I didn't want the eagles. The eagle is what I had. It was a target to me because obviously targets, you're hitting your target. But yeah, I mean, I've seen bits here and there. I mean, obviously, I think some things with the you have the map that you're going to various locations to collect items. I mean, there's lots of games that have things like that, and you can get cards and items that give you modifiers. So there's things that are similar, but I haven't played a game that's quite like this. Not saying there isn't one out there, but I mean, I haven't personally played one that I can think of right now.
And I think we've talked about excuse me. I want to say it was probably episode 50 where we talked about the Kickstarter that sadly was not funded. That's the second one out of all of our shows that has not made the funding that I know of at this point. But it was historical in that that particular game followed around the pirates in the Caribbean, the historical pirates, and them trying to escape from the Navy forces of the other colonizing European countries. And the cool thing, I guess the point I'm trying to make is you're getting a bit of history involved in the game, and that can have an educational quality to it as well, which I think is good, especially for a game for the family, and give kids a kind of a good look at history through a game format, which can make it maybe a little bit more interesting, maybe a little bit more palatable.
I do have to ask, Glenn, as since you've played this game before, obviously the subject matter the game's dealing with is pretty intense. Is that handled with respect, with reverence, or are there parts that make you sort of facepalm of like, why did that? Because obviously there's a lot of historical basis in the game, and with any game like this, I'm always curious to see, like,
I don't recall.
Does it go too far, or do they handle it well?
I don't recall. I'm trying to remember some exact cards. I think it just pretty much basically states like this thing happens. Right. It doesn't really go into lots of detail. It definitely does not try to get any, like, and then they got the Jews, which was good because who needs them? It didn't go into anything like that. I think it just kind of just flatly stated this happened at this time, or like the Auschwitz concentration, camp opened, the invasion of Poland begins. So it was more just stating
historical,
like what you would read like in a typical history textbook, where it's just simply this happened on this day in this year. It would give a little bit, sometimes it would go in a little brief description of what the event was, in case you didn't know what Kristallnacht was. It would just give a little description of it. But I don't think that they did anything that would be construed as that really could be construed as offensive, unless you were intentionally just looking to find something offensive.
Right. No, that's good to know. From the images I looked at, it didn't strike me as a game that was sort of in any way taking it lightly. That's just good to hear as well from the play perspective. Yeah,
it does look very objective in its historical representation of that particular period in history, which is definitely good. You don't want to have a game that could be construed as either supporting something that really was horrible, and to get that kind of, you know what I'm saying? You're right.
Yeah,
you have to treat it with reverence. You have to treat it, and the best way to do that is to just stick to the history and try to keep keep the gameplay, and I think that the structure of your time frame and certain events happening and knowing that the clock is ticking in this particular instance is better than trying to evoke any emotions through anything else that could be misconstrued, essentially. So that sounds like they found a good mechanic to get that that sense of urgency into the game. No, very cool. And who put out the game again?
Game Salute.
Okay.
And Game Salute's primarily they take people who have their own game ideas, and Game Salute's more of a publishing house that takes these games in and then publishes them, where they don't really have like a standing staff of game designers.
Oh, okay. No, that sounds cool. That sounds very cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention, Glenn.
Absolutely.
You can follow this Galactic Network podcast on Twitter, like our Facebook page, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us by searching Galactic Netcasts on all the major social networks, or you can click on the icons in the upper right-hand corner at gncasts.com for more stuff that we do. We are going to move on to the news. And I think that I've only played Traveler once in my life. But I found this story here. A new vehicle handbook is now available to order for Traveler. This is a very, very brief story, and that's okay. I want to spend a lot of time talking to Stephen, so we'll try to keep this short. If you're going to be traveling around in Traveler, you could travel with just your feet, or you could use a vehicle so your traveling is more travelable. I'm not sure who wrote that, but that was kind of weird. Anyway, if you want to get into a spiffy new vehicle, you shouldn't look much further than the vehicle handbook, which is now available for pre-order. Now, this is from their release. The vehicle handbook has been designed to be quick and easy to use, whether your travelers are looking to quickly upgrade or modify their humble air/raft, or construct a massive battle-ready walker armed with city-crushing weaponry from scratch. Even a large, multi-turreted, super-heavy battle tank will not take much longer than 5 minutes work. So, it's been so long since I've even touched Traveler. What is Traveler, Glenn?
Traveler? Oh wow. Traveler. It's sci-fi role play game. I haven't played it since 19 something.
Yeah, I was going to say that
I've been wanting to look into the new edition, but it's more. I'm trying to remember. I think it's more along the lines of more like a hard science fiction type stuff, where it's very human centric. I think there are aliens, but
yeah, I think you can play.
Yeah,
I think there are aliens, robots, sort of like everything sci-fi you could possibly want in Traveler.
Yeah,
yeah. But I think the worlds for most of it, it's centered more around the humans. But yeah, you could be aliens, and there were aliens, but
sure.
I mean, there was lots of stuff. I mean, you had tons of different jobs you could have. Ship design was insane. I mean, there was a lot of stuff for designing ships. I do remember that there was no. You did not have like instantaneous communication, through space, stuff like that. You had like faster than light speed, like jump drives, which moved through jump space, but it was short. I mean, jump still took like a week or two or something like that. But yeah, it was interesting because it dealt. Well, it had aliens. It dealt kind of more. It was less science fantasy, like you would have like a Star Wars, or even to a degree Star Trek can be, which is more kind of where you have science but you don't really try to explain it. You just, you have, why? How do we power this? Dilithium crystals. Okay.
So
All right.
it's really an attempt at like hard sci-fi,
Kind of
in an RPG.
Yeah.
And
from what I'm remembering, I mean, it's been a while since I've actually played.
Yep. And when I played, it was owned by GDW.
Yes, that's what I played too. It was a GDW game.
Yeah, Games Designers Workshop. Damn.
Which people often confuse with Games Workshop.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Stephen, any experience with Traveler?
I've never really played much of Traveler, and I think primarily it just sort of, for me, it came to when I was getting into role-playing games, it was really, well, do we want to do fantasy? Do we want to do modern-day White Wolf? Or do we want to do sci-fi of some kind? And I'm certain if we'd gone in the science fiction direction, Traveler, I feel like Traveler's the game that, or one of the games that we probably would have steered towards. But we went fantasy and we went a little bit modern day. We never really went sci-fi. So I'm vaguely aware of kind of the mechanical background to it. It uses it if you're comfortable in things like, D20 or GURPS, things like that, like Travelers, that sort of brand of system. But I've never played it, and I don't know. It's never really crossed paths with me, but I've heard good things about it. Just like with any of those kind of large scale role-playing games that you can sort of have an infinite number of permutations on, it can provide some great storytelling opportunities, definitely.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, and there was a Traveler Hero version where they had Traveler and they used the Hero system, and this was in 2006. Wow, I can't imagine trying to do Traveler using Hero, as much as I love Hero as a system. I bet you that could get really complicated, depending on how they had you do character creation and whatnot. Wow. All right. Well, there you go. A bit of old school gaming history, because Traveler first came out in 1977.
Yeah.
Through Games Workshop. And
I was not alive when that happened. That was before I was living.
Oh, God.
That was a year before I tried D&D.
I was 7 years old at the time. Yeah, and it was, I think you and I, Glenn, would have played probably at the point where Mega Traveler had come out.
Yeah, I played Mega Traveler.
Yeah.
My friend's brother had some of the original Traveler books that I remember reading through. And we didn't play Traveler a lot because 87-ish, that was my Star Frontiers years.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So,
God, yeah, I almost forgot about Star Frontiers, man. That was freaking huge. Oh, all right. Well, there was a nice little trip down the RPG memory lane with Traveler. If you like what you've heard on this Galactic Network podcast, please consider helping us out financially by going to gncasts.com/support. On that page, you'll find links to our Patreon campaign where you can make a small recurring monthly pledge of as little as $1. Or you can click on our Amazon affiliate link, make a purchase, and we get a very small amount from that sale. Again, you can go to gncasts.com/support. Now, we move on to the Kickstarter Spotlight. Last week, we talked about Rotted Capes, Survivor Guide, Volume 1. And I really think that I haven't backed the project yet. There's 12 days to go, so I'm going to hit it when I get paid on Friday, and I'm going to donate at the level where you get the core book as well. But just to kind of give everybody a reminder, Rotted Capes is a game where essentially the zombie virus, the zombie apocalypse happened, and the A-string superheroes who were the front line of defense went down. And a lot of them became zombies. Some of them were killed, but a lot of them were turned into zombies. So you are now a B or C string superhero who is trying to stop the zombie apocalypse and stop from getting your butt handed to you by an A-list superhero. Now, the thing about the superheroes is because they're genetically slightly different from humans, they're altered, they actually still have a bit of intelligence to them. They're not just mindless zombies with powers. They actually can think a bit, can plan a bit, can strategize a bit. So it makes them very dangerous, and it's very possible that they could kill you. So that's what Rotted Capes is about. You're a B string. You're the mystery men trying to stop the zombie apocalypse while getting, trying to not get your butt handed to you by a zombie superhero. So they Paradigm Concepts created a survivor's guide, which gave you additional powers, additional archetypes, different advantages, disadvantages, flaws, skills, personalities, and different powers. So, and because they're calling this Volume 1, I'm going to assume that if this is successful, that a Volume 2 will most likely happen. So, as of this point, on February 19th, they were looking for $2,000. That's their goal. As of right now, they're at $3,760. So, this is an all or nothing thing. So, it looks like it's going to happen now. And depending on the level you back at, the PDFs will be available in August of this year. And it looks like if you're looking for, even the hard copies will be available in August. So this is all going to happen towards the end of this summer. So that is good news. And I think I'm going to be donating at the $25 level, which will give me a PDF version of the Survivor's Guide and a PDF version of the Rotted Capes core book. So that's my plan. And there's 12 days to go. So we'll have to see what... And they did hit their first, and they did come up with a second stretch goal. Okay, so they've hit their first stretch goal, which is an expanded Survivor's Guide. More material and art will be added to the book. So that's cool. Now, we are going to move on to our new find. And what is that new find that you found here?
I don't know.
You do too.
Yes, I do too.
I was going to say I have at least two Kickstarters I could plug if you don't have one.
By Order of the Queen. This is a 2 to 4 player cooperative game. Basic story is the king has not returned from war, which has left the kingdom open to attack from enemies on all sides, and the queen has sent out the call for heroes far and wide to come and help save the kingdom. As the players, you actually control the various guilds of the city. Guildmaster of the Kingdom of Tessendor, and you're going to be having these heroes coming, and they're going to be signing with your different guilds. You will equip them, send them off on quests to basically protect the kingdom. As things happen, some of your heroes will die. You're trying to protect the villagers, protect the kingdom, and such as well. Nifty little. I like the art. It's got kind of a childlike art, I would call it. I was going to say it just like a storybook kind of quality. Yeah, like storybook quality art, and I love it. I love this type of art. It almost looks like something I would see, like, after Adventure Time. Check out By Order of the Queen. And it looks like it's a bit lighter play, but still meaty enough to still keep your attention. They say they call it an RPG light board game because they said they designed it with 3 principles in mind: is simple game mechanics, strong strategic gameplay, in an epic story-driven fantasy RPG setting. And it looks like something that would be more kind of an all ages type of play, which is great because sometimes finding games like this that you could play as an adult with younger people is often hard, because there's this. It's gotten better, but this is a kid's game, and as an adult, you'll be bored out of your mind playing it. Or this is a great fantasy strategy game, and there's so many rules and complexities to it that the kids will be lost. And it's hard finding something that balances between those two, that they can play as a family and everyone still has fun with it. As far as this setting goes, there's lots of other games. I mean, obviously, like a Ticket to Ride and stuff like that is a kind of more all ages game, but finding one that's fantasy strategy is hard. There's lots of them out there. I mean, Fantasy Flight has tons of them, but Fantasy Flight games tend to have 88-page rule books and 17,000 pieces. So for a younger player, it can be a bit daunting. And I love the fact that they have to show you some of the lore. They have it's by Order of the Queen coloring book.
I saw that. We're if you guys are checking us out on YouTube, I'm kind of scrolling through the Kickstarter page, and yeah, you get to see gameplay. I love Kickstarters where they do full-on gameplay and include a lot of stuff to give you a very good sense of what the project is, and they have it in spades here. So
yeah, and they were looking for $18,000. They've got almost 1,000 backers already. They're at 52,000. So this one's a go, provided nothing weird happens. Still 11 days left. As such, you can still get in on it. $20 gives you a PDF copy, a print and play copy of the game and the rules. $49 actually gets you a copy of the game. They're saying that's going to retail for about $60. They have different shipping. It's EU friendly. And then $98, you can get 2 copies if you want to buy one and give one as a gift. $100, you get the game with some original inked artwork as well, plus the stretch goals. Most of these, all basically once you hit the $49 level, that comes with the stretch goals as well, which they have unlocked a few already. Seeing as they're looking for 18,000, so they added. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Wait, where are they?
Well, they've got new event cards.
Yes, there it is.
They've got the lore of Tressendor PDF, which is, like you said, it's the kind of the coloring book of the lore of the realm that you'll be playing in.
Yep.
They have some new heroes and some crossover stuff for Implands. I've not heard of Implands, but that sounds interesting. They've got 4 new difficult monster cards. And we've talked about this before. It's always cool to see a Kickstarter that doesn't always focus on new material, new rules, new characters, but it improves the quality of the product itself. And they have reached a point now where you get linen finish on the cards and you get an upgraded box thickness. So it's going to be a more durable game that you're going to get, and it's going to feel a higher quality, especially with the linen finish on the cards. That's going to not only feel nice, but it's going to look nice too. So that is cool. Very cool. So yeah, and some of these bonuses are unique to Kickstarter. So if you get this, if you were to buy this in the store, I'm sure after this comes out, they'll try to find a distributor and get it out there. There are some things that you can only get if you back it in the Kickstarter. So that's always cool too, to give a little bit of an added incentive to purchase it at this point, as opposed to when it hits the stores. So there you go. Now this looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the art, and a portion of it kind of reminded me of Nate Taylor's work that he did on Princess and Mr. Whiffle.
Yeah, I can see that.
Which is Pat Rothfuss's sort of children's book that he put out. Yeah, this it looks really cool, and $49 for what you're going to get here. That's really kind of a steal.
Yeah.
And of note too is that they are EU friendly, Canada friendly, Australia friendly. So if you order it, and if you're in other parts of Europe and other parts of the world, you're not going to have to pay an arm and a leg for shipping to get it. So that's always good to see too. So it looks like they did a lot of pre-planning, got their ducks in a row, and they're going to get a good quality product out to people, and it's not going to cost a lot to get it to their homes. So that's awesome. Now, Stephen.
Yeah.
Does this sound like something that you might add to your game library?
Well, so I have a problem with Kickstarter.
Fair enough.
I may have already backed it. No, I'm just I do have a problem with Kickstarter. I don't know. Like, this sounds like a game I could totally get into. But I don't know. With any game, I'm always so hesitant to jump into it on Kickstarter because I've been burned a few times. So I always want to I always want to take a good hard look at the company, at what they put out before, things like that. But just kind of looking at this project page, like, they clearly have done their prep. They've clearly done their research. I love the artwork. I'm super, super into the art style that they have going. And it seems like it could be a really great game. What if I'd added to my, permanent game library? I don't really know, but this could be something that would be really great for busting out with the family, with people that maybe don't have, where I sort of keep my gamers games on the shelves and pull out something that's a little bit simpler, but still has some strategy to it, and still has kind of a setting that can work for a wide variety of people. So I don't know. This is definitely one I'm going to be taking a look at and seeing what they're offering, and taking a look at where it could fit on my very crowded board game shelf.
Yeah, and it helps too that the guy who's making this, David Gerard, has done 2 previous Kickstarters that were successful. And he, from everything I can tell, he followed through on what he did. So
yeah, I'm taking a look at, he did Imps and Monsters. Oh, Junk King was the other one. I think that was his first one that he did.
Yeah.
So always do your due diligence if you're looking to hand your money over you're not usually going to buy a car sight unseen. Now, a game obviously is not a car, but the principle is relatively the same. You're looking to hand your money to somebody, and you want to make sure that you're not going to hand somebody money and they're gonna spend it on hookers and booze and not give you your game. So always do the research, always look into it. So
God, I really love the graphic design on the cards that they're working with. Like, I don't want to get all I'm a graphic designer like squeeing about this, but just looking at the character cards and how they've sort of set that up is what I have dreamed about for games that I'm throwing around in my brain. I'm like, yes, that is the best. I'm a big fan.
And some of the artwork on the cards especially kind of remind me a little bit of Munchkin. In their look and feel, more in their feel than their actual design, but it feels it's like channeling a little bit of your inner child into a design for a monster that doesn't quite look monstrous, but still has the look of something that could be potentially dangerous. So they really ride that fine line of making it accessible to kids, not making it too scary. And this kind of looks like what I would call a gateway drug type game. It's a game that doesn't look like it's overly rules heavy. Looks like you could break it out, probably play for a half an hour or so, maybe 45 minutes at the most, and kind of get people used to the feel of playing a board game other than a simplistic board game. This is kind of that half step.
Kind of. They say the recommended playtime is 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay, never mind. I rescind that statement.
it could be a good game for tricking people who don't know what they're getting into. Be like, look at this fun little game. Oh, it'll be great, guys. 2 hours later.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, it's a cooperative game. I think I might have
Yeah.
phased out if you'd mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm definitely going to look into this.
And that's $6 shipping in the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
That ain't bad.
And $16 for EU friendly. The rest of the world is $21. So, wow. That's cool. Well, thank you very much for bringing this one to our attention, and we will be keeping an eye. And next meeting of the Adventure Party will tell you how By Order of the Queen has done. There's 11 days to go, so we're going to see. Well, obviously they've broken their goal, but let's see how far they go. This is
Brad, if it is cool, I would love to mention a couple Kickstarters that I am also super excited about right now.
Absolutely.
I'm going to make them lightning quick. I won't get too into them, but just to mention them because there's 2 I'm backing right now that I'm excited about from the RPG spectrum that might be interesting to some folks. So the first is a game called The Watch RPG by...
I almost brought that one.
Yeah, The Watch is great. It's by Anna Creeder and Andrew Medeiros. Are you guys familiar with the Powered by the Apocalypse RPG system?
Yes.
Yes, we've talked
From
about
like Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, all those sorts of games. Amazing system that was created originally by Vincent Baker and Meguey Baker in Apocalypse World, which is one of my top 5 RPGs. And it has since spawned a huge number of other games based in that basic rule system, which is a really solid rule system of basically your character is essentially a character booklet and you make your character by checking off some things. It's a quick, fun character creation system. So The Watch is a new game using that system by Anna Creeder and Andrew Medeiros. And in this game, you're playing your group of characters are playing essentially warriors. They're soldiers. They're specifically women and non-binary femme soldiers who are defending their home from this entity known as the Shadow. And it has sort of reached its tendrils into your land and has taken out the vast majority of the soldiers or has influenced them in some way and twisted them into something else so that you are the Watch and you are what is left to defend your home. And it's a really interesting game that's really rooted in kind of battlefield war drama, but also with just a touch of light fantasy and these characters that you can play that are just kind of badass. They have a rules preview up available on the Kickstarter. If you become a backer, you can read the rules preview and get an idea for all these kind of character archetypes you can play within this group of elite soldiers. But it's a really interesting game that deals, I think, with some really great issues and approaches some really, some stuff that I'd love to see people engaging with more in the gaming community. So The Watch, definitely one to check out. It's not currently funded. They've got 27 days left. They're a bit over halfway there.
Yeah.
So, but definitely check it out.
I just saw they said one of their primary inspirations was Night Witches.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Night Witches is fantastic, right?
Yep.
But Night Witches being a great example of a game where you play as women kicking ass, and it's sort of the best thing ever. So definitely highly recommended. I've worked with Anna directly on projects before, and
cool.
I've seen some other stuff that they put out. Andrew Medeiros, I backed one of his former projects, The Forgotten, which is a really great LARP about wartime. So they do some great stuff on their own and together. So I'm really excited to see this kind of united project. So definitely check it out.
And I see that, I'm sorry to interrupt. I see that former guest Matthew McFarlane, who did Chill 3rd Edition, is backing this project as well. Because I follow him on Kickstarter, I see that he popped up. So Matthew from Chill is back in this as well, so he's pretty pumped too.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. So this is going to be a good one. The second one I wanted to mention was a campaign about a game called Companion's Tale, and that just launched literally in the past day or so. So Companion's Tale has funded. It's doing very, very well. It's almost eclipsed it 200% at this point. But what Companion's Tale is about is that's inspired by a game called The Quiet Year by Avery McNuldo. Sorry, I'm butchering her last name. I apologize. But this is a map-making storytelling game. So while you're playing it, you are making a map of basically your travels. And what you're doing through this story is you are telling the tale of an epic hero, of this great hero of the realm. None of you are playing this hero. However, you are playing this hero's companions. So you are going to like cooperatively kind of narrate this story based on not the hero's journeys directly, but these companions' interactions with the hero, whether you're the person who taught the hero, you were their mentor, whether you were their lover, whether you were their rival. Right, you're going to be someone who's had a strong influence or connection with this heroic figure, and you are going to kind of, as a group, tell stories and build out this hero's journey, while you make sort of a map of all the places that they visited and the things that they've done and the battles they've won. So this is kind of a card-based game. You have cards that give you themes. You have cards that actually show you companions. That companion kind of archetypes, like the mentor or the rival. You're going to have face cards that have pictures of these companions to kind of give you jumping off points. Spoiler alert, I may have backed at the level where I get to be one of them. So you might see my face in the game.
Nice.
You'll definitely see me. But yeah, so this is the second one I just wanted to mention because this is a really great game as well. I've heard about it for a really long time. This is being done by a group that call themselves Sweet Potato Press, but it was designed by Laura Simpson, who's a really fantastic game designer. I heard about this on the Backstory podcast, actually, originally, and you can listen to that interview through the website here. But it's got a great group of people working on this. Nathan Paoletta is another game designer. He's doing the graphic design for it. He's touched a lot of indie games with graphic design. Jonathan Walton, who also does a ton of stuff. So just there's a huge cast of indie folks working on this game. And I think that Laura's put together something really, really good here. So Companion's Tale, definitely worth checking out.
And once again, Matthew McFarland of Chill 3rd Edition is backing this as well.
And once again, this was one of the other ones I looked at 3 things to pull, and Companion's Tale and The Watch were the other 2 I was looking at. But I wanted to do a board game this week because we did an RPG last week.
Yep, we did. Yep. So look at that.
This is also being backed by Ben Robbins, who did Microscope, Vincent Baker, who did Apocalypse World. Like a lot of people are supporting both of these games, actually, that are definitely, they know what they're talking about in the indie community. So definitely check these out.
Very cool. Thank you for the heads up on that, Stephen.
No
so
problem.
That was Companion's Tale, and I need to back up here.
The Watch.
Mm-hmm. So keep an eye on those games. 27 days to go for The Watch, 30 days to go for Companion's Tale. But don't walk, run, and check those out today. All right. We're done with Kickstarter, and now we're going to give you the floor, Stephen. And just to remind everybody, Stephen Dewey here is the creator of the RPG that Glenn brought to us called 10 Candles. And we talked about it at the beginning, but just to give you the premise before we give Stephen the floor here, 10 Candles is what he calls tragic horror role-playing. You're going to die. This is one-shot material. You gather together. You are telling probably the story of your characters essentially last 2 to 3 hours of life on this earth. Well, I mean, time scale may vary, but your gameplay is going to be about 2 to 3 hours. I think you kind of said, and the candles are very important to this whole process. One, it is your soul lighting, recommended soul lighting for the game, which adds a level. And that's what, I thought about that. I'm like, my God, everything that you've done here in 10 Candles, which makes it truly awesome, is mood is essential. It's almost like another player in the game. It is critical to the game, and it is a critical mechanic. And part of that is the candles, and the candles do help. Like when you have to burn cards to get another hope die, or whatever you're going to do, that those candles help set the mood, but they can also work against you if you when you get to the end of the game. If all the candles are out, everybody's dead. That's the end of the game. If you bump the table and a candle goes out,
that happens.
The scene ends, and yes, that can happen. The scene ends, and you move on, and you're one step closer to the end. One of the other things that I thought was a great mechanic was, after you've created your character, you've come up with the story, you've got a thing kind of built around who the character is. Everybody gets a chance to record the final message for their character, which I can only imagine, as the candles are all extinguished and that is played, that particular moment probably gives you a serious case of the goosebumps. So everything that you put together here is so mood driven. I freaking lost my mind. And like I said, the next day you had my money, because I had to get this game and look at it closer. So again, that I had to contact you immediately and get you on the show. So
I'm glad you did.
I'm very glad I did too. So 10 Candles is so unique in that it is mood driven, like I said. How did you pull that all together? How did you make something that is unique in making such a narrative driven game?
Well, so a lot of my background prior to making 10 Candles did come, at least in some extent, or to some extent, from playing a lot of other indie tabletop storytelling games. So I probably had about 3 to 4 years prior to really sitting down and starting on 10 Candles, where I had some experience with some other of the indie games out there. And some of them are emotional. Some of them are very evocative. Not all of them, but some of them. But really what that gave me was a sort of taste for what rules could be. Because prior to that, I'd really only had experience with Pathfinder, D&D, games like that. And I sort of had a preconceived understanding of kind of how games could exist and what rules could be and what rule books could be, and how you could really build a game. So once I'd sort of broken out of that and had played some of these other games that are out there, I had that realization of, like you can kind of do anything that you want to do.
Sure.
So then that, paired with the fact that I also have a background in live action role-playing and theater and more immersive gaming experiences, because you're there and being your character. So I had a healthy respect for the power of immersion, and something that I had always tried to do, even in my D&D games, was try and make that gap between player and GM a little small, or between players and the story a little smaller, so that you could be more immersed, you could be more involved and entrenched in the story that you're telling. So I kind of had all these things going on in my head when I sat down to play, or when I sat down to make a game. And I'd had an idea for a while about a game that used candles in some way. And I liked the idea, because I use candles when I run a D&D game, or when I sit down to play anything, because just for theme, just for atmosphere, because I recognize from live action that any little touch you can throw in there could help bridge that gap. So I'd had this idea where, you have candles, and the game itself lasts for the life of the candle, and you sort of have that brief window. And when I'd paired that up with my knowledge of indie games and what was possible, like I could just do that. Like that's a thing I could just make. And it sort of came out to be, well, this is probably a horror game. And things sort of fell in place from there, calling on some of the other games I'd played for little bits of inspiration. When is it, how much narrative control is okay to give players? Well, actually a whole bunch, and
Sure, yeah.
how much, how do you want to how do you want to share that narration? Okay, well, maybe in some games it's like, okay, well, you roll a conflict, and depending how you roll, you get to narrate it. Little things like that, little pieces from all these different games. And this idea of a game just settled in my head that was like a horror game, a one-shot horror game. It lasted for the light of a candle. And I didn't want to make it for a while because there are already so many great survival horror games out there. There are just like Dread RPG exists. And because Dread RPG exists, why does anyone else need to make any RPG about horror ever again? Because it's perfect and amazing. And then I had sort of this idea of, well, what if everyone died? And I couldn't tell you where that specific idea came from, but when it hit me, I'm like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And everything just sort of flowed forth from that breakthrough, and kind of became what 10 Candles is now.
And I just want to interject. It's one of the things I love with this game, but just with a lot of these games that are designed to be basically played more as one shots.
Yeah.
I think it really opens up so many more role play possibilities.
Yes. Yeah.
Because of the fact that you can just say, I'm going to sacrifice myself for the group. Whereas in a D&D game, or let's not even say D&D, because in D&D they can just resurrect you. But say you were playing like a Traveler or a Star Wars or some other game where you can't just magically raise people from the dead.
Yeah,
you're less likely to take those more heroic risks because of the fact that death can be very real, and this is an ongoing campaign.
Exactly. Yeah, and there have been some people who have asked me, to make a kind of a campaign version of the game, and I did actually put one together as part of the Kickstarter that I'm going to be putting out. But really, like it shines as a one shot. Like a lot of those games shine as one shot games for that exact reason. When you've got those parameters in place, you are a lot more free to dive headfirst into the experience and just sort of do what feels right, rather than feeling like you need to hold back for the longevity of the game.
And quite honestly, that mechanic almost seems freeing in a fashion.
Yep.
You're not bound to. How do I want to phrase this?
Winning.
Accumulation of stuff, of wealth, of armor, of whatever. It's not there. You're only going to be able to take as much as you can carry, or if you maybe in the Declaration of Truths, you somehow finagle some kind of vehicle, whatever, like a tricycle, sort of a bike with a wagon attached to it or whatever. But I mean, you're not going to be weighed down by that because there is a time limit to your life.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter what you find in the end.
Yeah,
but yeah, there was a one of the things that I found immediately upon framing the game like where everyone dies at the end, and I think it took me one play test of it to realize that that's how it had to be, because I did one play test the other way where you could survive, and immediately I realized no, it doesn't work that way. Because what I found was what I wanted to do was build a game where there was a lot of player narrative control. I wanted a very collaborative gaming experience. I didn't want another survival horror game, because again, Dread exists and is perfect. I didn't want another one where you've got a GM and you have the players, and it's sort of the GM against the players. The GM wants to kill off the players The GM wants the monsters to win. The players are trying to survive, and they're trying to outsmart the GM or to get lucky die rolls. And it's this very antagonistic sort of play style. And that works perfectly for a survival horror game, because that's the emotional, those are the emotional beats you want to hit with that kind of game, is that very adversarial, you know, just trying to like grab at what you can. But when you're making a game like that, when those are the stakes, you can't give players a lot of narrative control. You got to give them little victories that they can win. You know, you get one die roll, maybe you succeed, but if the die roll goes bad, you could die. Like a lot like, you know, Black Orchestra, right? Anything you do could really screw you over. It's a risk. It's, you know, have to kind of risk versus reward, and the GM is gonna not have any mercy when they're doling out punishments. And that's a great sort of theme for those games. But if you introduce the sort of player-based narrative control or the collaborative storytelling elements that 10 Candles uses into a game like that, well, that no one would ever die, because the players can just, if there is that possibility to win effectively, to get out and survive, why wouldn't you want to do that? Like, why wouldn't you approach the game like that? It doesn't make, like, you know, hashtag game theory, no one's going to do that. It's just that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Reducing that, just removing that completely from the equation, people realize, okay, there's literally no way I can win. There's no way I can survive. Then you can suddenly give just buckets of narrative control. Just like, we all tell the story together. The players are basically GMs. This is very collaborative, very open. You have all the power in the world, because we all know that you can't do anything with it. We all know that in the grand scheme of things, you can't win with it. But what you can do is you can make a really cool story with it. You can have all those really awesome moments and all those, you know, narrative beats and emotional beats and really cool kick-ass spotlight moments that you want, because going beyond what is dramatically and story appropriate doesn't do anything additional for you. It just sort of makes things weird, and you kind of naturally fall into this really comfortable kind of give and take with the GM and the players, where we're really all on the same team. Even though I'm the GM and you're the players, we're all working together.
Yeah, and the one mechanic that I really enjoy too is, as you know, the candles start being, you know, taken out with people, you know, losing challenges, more of the dice control starts going to the GM. And the thing that I kind of saw and liked about that is, at a certain point, I think we all kind of get invested in the characters that we play.
Yeah.
If you've structured something where there is a time limit to the life of your character, if you all of a sudden get struck with that sense of mortality and you really, oh God, I want this character to survive, the only way to really guarantee that is to start sliding some more of that control slowly over to the game master to, you know, to especially get that sense of mortality and the difficulty for you to continue to survive as the candles keep going out. So I thought that was kind of a neat mechanic to kind of circumvent that survival instinct.
I think it also builds up the fact that, as team progresses, you, even if you're surviving up to that point, you are still losing more and more control over your fate.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
There's definitely a feeling of, you know, you can't really get attached to, unless you have, you know, you need to see someone succeed before you can love them as a character, right? You need to see them at their best. And there's no real emotional kick to losing them or losing that power or things being taken away unless they have it to begin with. So that feeling of, you know, right up at the beginning of the game, the players have basically never fail and never lose narration rights. And you see all of these characters are functioning pretty much at their best. And you can have scenes where they're just, you're rock stars and you're not rolling any ones and you're keeping to hold all your dice and you get to just go, 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 go. And you can try to hold on to that as long as you can and as long as you're able to. And having that time where at the beginning of the game where you sort of got that high, and then that high very slowly diminishing, that is exactly there to make you feel like, you know, you've fallen in love or you become attached to these characters because you've been with them when they've been successful, and now you have to sort of lose that in a very slow and creeping way. You know, that is absolutely designed for that exact like hit to the feelings of, you know, I've developed a bond with them because we've been successful together, and now that's all sort of shifting.
It's slowly,
falling away.
yeah, exactly. You know, the one thing that I really enjoyed about the mechanic is, when you first start the game, you do the declaration of truths, but as a candle goes out and you begin a new scene, there's the declaration of truths. And it really kind of helps, especially sets the tone for what's going to happen in this next scene, because the players will have a little bit of that opportunity to inject maybe a little something to give a little bit of hope to these people. Why did you use that? And does it help serve more than just a narrative purpose?
Yeah, I mean, so for the most part, all of the rules in 10 Candles, so I really tried to make this a very rules light, narrative heavy RPG. And one of my goals with the rules, and I know what a lot of people tend to like about the rules, is while there are a lot of them, right, there's like 100 pages in that rule book. Just like you said, a lot of the time the impression is, oh, it didn't seem like that much, right? Because there's not a lot of rules that you need to reference during play. There's not a lot that's really going on that is going to get in the way of your gameplay. The rules are there to sort of get in, do what they need to do, and get out of your way. And one of the ways that I was kind of able to do that, or one of my design intentions, was every rule, every mechanic is kind of doing 6 things at once. You know, some of them have a mechanical element, but they also have an emotional element. They also have something for the GM, to help the GM, or something to help the players. So the establishing truths does a huge number of things, because this is really, so like one of those obviously is meant to sort of set the scene, right? A big thing in sort of more freeform games like this, where the GM's not working off of an adventure path, excuse me, or a campaign guide, right? You need to set these scenes in some way. And that's a very kind of a quick, very collaborative way to establish, here are some important things about the characters or the world, and we can sort of use this as a jumping off point for the game. Part of that is there to help the GM, because I really wanted this to be a zero prep, one-shot game where you have to literally do nothing as the GM to sit down and start playing. And establishing truths is sort of a trick to help with that, because, you know, the GM up front never really, the GM can really fully rely on the players up front to basically fill in all the shadows and corners of the story. You have the moments which players create during character creation, which are all of the huge emotional touchstones and events of the game, already handily pre-written for you on index cards now.
Yep.
And you have the establishing truths, where even once we, you know, once I as the GM have narrated kind of a negative outcome to whatever conflict was failed, I now turn to the players and I basically can say, tell me what you want to see in the next scene, or tell me what's interesting to you as players. And I can take that information and I can build off of it. If someone's talking about the weather's changing, or they hear sirens in the distance, or whatever the players can come up with, that's going to give me a jumping off point as the GM. That's going to give me something to work with, so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel and sort of pull story threads out of my head. I can literally just use what I've been given, just like with the moments, just like with the conflict resolution, narrative control that the players have. All of that stuff sort of feeds into helping promote the GM running, essentially making the GM look really good at what they're doing, because they're already being given all the ideas. And it's one of those games where it looks really easy to GM, because it kind of is easy to GM that game, because you have all that info to go off of. So it does a lot of those things. And obviously there's some emotional elements to it as well, because you have the diminishing truths over time. You know, you get less and less and less truths. And that sort of gives a feeling of ritual to the game. That gives a feeling of, again, a loss of just another demonstration of kind of a loss of narrative control over the game. There's less time jumps between the scenes. So if you have less truths, inherently you're going to probably move the narrative forward less dramatically. So at the beginning of the game, you might jump to like a whole other city, whereas at the end of the game, you're really like, you're probably in the middle of a big fight and there's no way to get away from it with your truths. So there's sort of a little bit of that meta element as well, where you're kind of, it's the mechanics are sort of building the arc of the game for you. And 10 Candles is really a game about arcs. It's a game about here's going to be the arcs of your story. Every scene has an arc. The game has an arc. And when you're talking about storytelling in general, when you're trying to make a good story, when you're trying to write a good story or watching a movie or something like that, what's going to do that is this sort of arcs of narrative that are built in. So one of my goals with establishing truths and several of the other mechanics is you don't have to have a GM who is a master storyteller and knows inherently how to build storytelling arcs into a game, because they're already there. They're already, you know, kind of woven in to a lot of the mechanics. So even if you've never GM'd before, you could pick up 10 Candles and have a pretty reliably good experience that anyone else has had playing the game. It's a very reliably reproducible experience, because a lot of those, how the story flows and the arc of the emotional impact is going to be the same every time for the most part.
Yeah. In the one we played, there was the final truth uttered by a player was, I have one round left.
Love it. I love it.
Oh, wow.
So good. Yeah.
I love stuff, right? Because there's this beautiful moment where people who haven't played before, it will sort of click in their head about halfway through that truths don't need to be good.
Yeah.
That truths can be bad. Truths can be thematic and shape the story. And I see this click in people's heads, and they'll ask, like, can I just say that, like, the monsters are nearby, or that, like, our car's almost out of gas? I'm like, yes, you can.
Yes,
and
you
get
can.
so excited, because, like, I get to, like, both be excited about a hero and kind of be a bad guy. This is amazing. And it's great. It's great.
It just, that emotional investment, not so much in the character, but in the story itself, to see somebody go, oh, click, and, you know, having that ability to, you know, make something positive happen or negative happen for the sake of the story, as opposed to the survival of the characters, got to be gratifying at such a level. For a GM to see that happen.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head too, because this is really a kind of a weird way to say it would be like the story is in essence one of the heroes of the game. And when most tabletop games, you're really invested in your hero, your character. That's what you're going to become emotionally attached to. But in 10 Candles, more often than not, what you become attached to is the story, because you can't just be attached to your character. You already know how that goes.
Yeah,
you already know the end of your character, but you don't know what the end of the story is. So you become more interested in how that's going to take shape and how that's going to change and grow, just as much as these characters. But you're putting players a little bit just on the edge of the GM seat, and you're able to kind of turn the GM screen towards them and say, we're storytelling now. And give them that connection with everything more from the top, you know, that big picture view from the top down. And that's going to bring people in and make them very interested and connected with the narrative as a whole.
Sure. Now, you know, like if you play, say, Pathfinder or D&D or, you know, Cyberpunk, whatever, and your character dies, sometimes you'll wander away. You're like, well, I'll just make another character for next time or whatever. But with this, I could see you most certainly, because you have been invested in creating the story from the get-go, having the control of the direction of the game, that even if your character is going to die, but even if that character happens to die early, you'd want to sit and wait to see how it all plays out.
Right.
Because you've injected yourself quite literally into this story to help shape it. So that emotional investment, even at that level, will guarantee that people are going to, sit and stay to hear how everything pans out.
Yeah.
So
you're not just a dude with a sword.
Yeah,
you are
exactly.
a storyteller. Like,
Yep.
you are here to tell part of this tale. You as the player are way more important than your character is, because you're the one who's actually sharing in this experience. Like, that's what it's all about. So there's definitely that, that desire to, we're all going to stick with this till the end. And I've had definitely a handful of games where people have been like, I really needed to leave like 2 hours ago, and I was just going to kill my character off, but I don't want, like, this is bigger than me, and I want to see how this story ends, because I'm so invested, because I've helped create it.
Yeah.
Not just I've been a character in it, but I've helped give it form, and now I have a sort of a sense of ownership and connection over it, because I'm the one telling it. I'm on this kind of collaborative team of people telling the story.
Yep. I was thinking about, I'm in the process of putting together a live play, basically White Wolf Hunters Hunted, Wild West sort of a game, and doing it remotely using Roll20 essentially to get everybody kind of called in and all at the same place to play the game and record that as a show. And I was thinking, we would jump from, we'd do maybe White Wolf for a while, and maybe we'd do Deadlands for a while, or, mix it up. But I was thinking, God, it would be cool to do, because it would be a finite story. It would be a great one shot as kind of a palate cleanser between games. But I was thinking, the mood is so critical. It would be almost impossible, I think, to get that same feel of having everybody in the same room with these candles starting to go out without everybody having like a set of candles in their area where they're talking from, and try to capture that mood and capture that urgency as time runs out for these people. So
it's tough.
Yeah. And I'm like, I have to scrap that idea. I don't think I can do that properly. It's
one of those things where, people will ask me, can I play this online? Has anyone had any success? I'll see like Reddit threads. Has anyone had any success playing 10 Candles on Skype or something like that? And I think there's a tendency, because a lot of RPGs are very hackable. A lot of RPGs are very like, well, we'll take what we like from this system, and
sure.
I really like action points, so I'll just put that. There's a lot of that. So I think we as gamers sort of inherently look at, what's necessary and what isn't necessary in terms of a game's rulebook. And God, there's definitely a part of me that thinks, or that has certainly tried to make sure that every single thing in that rule book is necessary for something, if not for 6 things, right? Every little thing in there has a purpose. I don't ask people to play in the dark. I ask people to play in the dark because of the atmosphere, obviously, that entails. Yes, that's very clearly one of the elements there, but there's more to it. Like, there's a lot more. So like sitting in the dark, for example, there's a lot of, I won't get too much into emotional game design theory, but to really make immersive gameplay, to make a horror game, you want to make players genuinely frightened, right? If you want to build a correct horror game, I don't maybe shouldn't throw out the word correct, like I know what I'm talking about, but
like a proper
horror game. If you really want to, if you're playing a horror game, you're probably playing it to get a little spooked.
Yeah.
And getting scared is really hard to do around a table. And I ran a panel at Metatopia this last year about designing emotions in games about this, right? Because it's a tricky thing. If you want to have a genuine horror experience around a table playing a game, that's really hard because there's this distance between where you are and where your characters are. And all of that huge gap that's in the middle, you have all that space to like be able to process those emotions and be okay with them. Your characters might be fighting horrible monsters, going through horrible things, but you're sitting around a table and are relatively comfortable, and you're not going to be actually genuinely frightened unless your GM pulls off like a jump scare or has some really creepy music, right? Mm-hmm. So what you're going for as when you're making horror games and a lot of emotional games from various things is you're trying to achieve a concept called bleed. In LARP circles, the term is called bleed, which the short summary is basically if you as a player feel an emotion, then that may bleed into your character and your character will feel that emotion and vice versa. Right. Sure. So there can be bleed into a game and bleed out of a game. And with a horror game, the horror genre generally is built on the idea of bleed. When you go into a horror movie, you as a audience member are going to get frightened because there's going to be loud music and people are going to be jumping out at you. And that is going to make you empathize with the fear the characters on the screen are feeling. You're going to be scared like they are. You have this bleed achieved, you're going to have a horror movie. So with games, it's tricky, but you have to sort of create emotions in the real world that affect you as players in order for that to bleed over to your characters and have them genuinely terrified. And then you've got this circle of emotions where then your character, the more scared your characters are, the more scared you'd get. So while fear is really tricky to get people to feel out of game in the real world, anxiety is really easy to get people to feel in the real world. Yep. And there is this, if you can generate anxiety in a player, when that bleeds in, it can, because you've got that gap of distance, that can sort of be like, well, my character is supposed to be feeling fear. So it kind of changes. And then you have that cycle back of less anxiety and more fear. And the more that cycles through, the more it becomes fear. So a ton of what is in 10 Candles are made to be these little anxiety triggers, these little building blocks of anxiety. And when you look at a game like Dread, right, where you've got the Jenga tower that you have to pull from every time you do a conflict, there's nothing that is more anxiety inducing than a Jenga tower, right? And you have so Dread is a great example of a survival horror game. Because with survival horror, if you're monitoring those anxiety levels, you want these spikes, right? That's the jump scares. You want those spikes of anxiety. So Dread does that perfectly. For a tragic horror game where you kind of already know the ending, you have to kind of build that creeping dread, that very slow, roiling fear. And that takes a lot of these little anxiety components. So anything from playing in the dark, not being able to really see your dice rolls all that well, the nerves about potentially blowing out candles too early accidentally, the fact that tea light candles about an hour in sort of just become invisible and you have no idea how much wax is left, like all of these little things, burning cards, but burning a card, fires an anxiety trigger for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not accidentally not darkening a candle when you go to burn a card, the fact that you can't touch candles when you go to darken them, so you can't pull one away to blow it out, you have to darken it, you might darken another one. All these little things that sort of compile together to make you feel anxious as a person in the real world, which will make the horror experience work. It will make you invested emotionally in the game, which will help you bridge that immersion gap.
Yeah.
So kind of all of that to say, playing over a computer is really tricky because you can still play the game. I've run 10 Candles at loud, noisy convention halls. It will be running at PAX East in a couple weeks. Like, I'm sure it will be. And it's done. You can play the game and you can tell people to just imagine that it's dark and spooky. But you are going to miss some things, right? Because you are going to miss some of those anxiety triggers. You're going to miss some of those little emotional representations, and that will, you'll still enjoy the game, but it will be a different experience, and that's sort of impossible to get around. And I always feel bad when I tell people online game plays kind of hard. Maybe try to play in person, but because I know people want to do that, but it is difficult.
Yeah, I can't see a way to do it justice by running it through Roll20 or remotely, and
maybe if you hooked it up like that thing in that James Bond movie where they're playing to take over the world, you get shocked. So if you rig something up where whenever a candle goes out, you get electrocuted. You can go through that anxiety.
You've cracked it. That's it, right? That's the answer. I'll call it 10 volts.
Yeah. It's a little extreme, but yeah, I could see that possibly working.
I have tossed around an idea. I think the way to do it is to sort of build a 10 candles hack that is specifically meant for online play. And I think the way that I do that is by rating it up as like a sci-fi, the ship's you're all aboard a ship and the ship is dying and you're all in your separate sectors. And I've seen some games like this before that utilize things like Google Hangouts or Skype, and you hook up a webcam, and most computers have a brightness setting that goes between 0 and 100.
Okay.
And basically reframing the game entirely and building it specifically for online play. So you could do a thing where we can all play on our computers in dark rooms and only lit by the light of your monitor, essentially. And it's a little bit more of a LARP and a little bit less of a tabletop RPG. But you could essentially, every time a candle goes out, you lower your monitor brightness setting by 10, right? So your monitors get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And this video kind of feed that you have connected to the other parts of the ship grow less reliable. Like that, I'm certain that there is a way to make that, and I've been tossing around in my head for a while, but I just haven't had a chance to actually sit down and write it yet. But it's there.
Super cool.
It's possible. Yeah. I know it's possible. It's just, I think you do have to sort of reframe the entire game and make it its own little thing, but based very heavily on all the core elements.
Yep.
I'm just thinking how cool it'd be is as you get right towards the end of the game, if someone does die, they just turn their camera off. Yep. They can still hear what's going on, but the fact is now you have that one screen that's blank.
Right.
Just add that extra bit.
You start seeing video feeds dropping out. Oh, yeah. Yep. Right. So as soon as you say it, it's yeah, that definitely could work. I don't know the specifics, but I really want to make it happen. I need to have a free night ever to work on that.
Sure. Well, maybe there's a way I could actually pull this off. So, but I think that I kind of wonder how it would sound as a podcast, as somebody listening to it. Would they get that sense of urgency and fear, or would that come through in the kind of the performance of the characters? But that's something for another time, probably.
I think you could definitely workshop that. I think there's probably in place of actually seeing people's faces via the podcast, you could potentially have audio cues, when people dim down their monitors, power at 90%, and kind of do these audio cues for your listeners as you're going.
Oh, sure. Yep.
I'm sure there are ways.
Okay. Yeah, I too will have to sit down and think about this and try to make it happen, because I really love the fact that you have made, again, there's an apocalypse that happens. The world has gone dark, or where you're at has gone dark. If you're in space, the stars you can't see the stars. If you're on Earth, you can't see, again, you can't, there's total darkness. It doesn't matter what time of day it is or night, there's nothing. And it's complete blackness. But it's open-ended as to what that is. Is it magical? Is it science-based? Has the Earth been surrounded by, ships that are blocking the light, and they're, aliens are coming to kill you? It is so open-ended. And, one of the things that I thought was cool is when you create the characters, keeping in mind with the open-endedness, you get a note card and you write descriptors. You get to write essentially two, something that's positive, something that's more negative. And you write that down, but then you swap it out. So the first step, as I recall, the first step is you kind of come up with a character concept. You're a police officer.
Not even. You start with the traits right out the gate.
Okay, you do. Okay, I got that backwards. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because you wanna build. The reason that sort of exists the way it does is because I specifically don't want you coming to the table with a character concept.
Okay,
right?
Great. Okay. Yep, that makes sense.
The GM is going to pick a module. They can pick one of these little modules in the back of the book. There's like 25 in the book, but it's so easy to make them. There's already like a bunch online. And none of the players presumably will even know what that module is. Maybe, I don't know. I usually pick it literally when I sit down. Then the players will make these traits, so a positive and negative trait, and then they pass them away. So you're going to get two traits. You'll have no idea what they are ahead of time. You'll have no idea what the module is ahead of time. But you'll get these traits, and then the GM will read the module. And then based on those two pieces of information that there's no conceivable way you could have acquired, then and only then will you make your character, your character concept, because you are just going in completely blind, right? No prep required for the GM or players, because you're going to make them right then and there based on what you have. And I think that really kind of forcing you as a player to think about it really fresh like that, to really come in with a blank slate. Like what do I want to make right off the top of my head? It not only gets you in already starting in that kind of improv level that's really good for the game of like, we're just going to be making stuff up right out of nowhere, right? That which is kind of a core component of the game. But also it allows you to come into that character without any attachment, any preconceived notion about what their story is going to be. It's all going to be very much organically grown from around the gaming table.
The thing that I thought was also cool too is as you write down your essentially trait words to keep things open-ended, but then you pass them to the people, either on the left or the right of you, depending on which it is, as I recall.
Yep.
And then you take those new cards that you've gotten, and then you build your character on that. And I think maybe we've answered that question. The question I was going to ask is why you decided not to allow players to keep the note card descriptors of the traits when they to describe their character.
Yeah, I totally.
That's got to be. Yeah, no, that's perfect, because that helps ensure that there's no reduced emotional attachment to the character that is going to die within probably 3 hours of gameplay. So
yeah, we really to get people really attached at the level they want, or the level I think you want with 10 Candles, you really want everything to be created at table. Like the story starts when we sit down and ends when we get up. And the best way to kind of approach doing that, I think, is to really go in fresh, to really go in with an empty mind. Even the GM, like none of us, no players or GM, I don't have any idea what's going to happen, but we're all going to kind of create it together. It's right away, it's collaborative. You're working as a team to create these traits. You're all saying, like, what would I be interested in seeing around the table? You already have a vested interest in these other players and the other characters more than your own, because you have sort of created a part of them and they've created a part of you. So again, it does like 6 different things, but all of them sort of go towards making this very fresh and new experience without worry of a lot of, people coming in with any sort of character baggage that they want to roll with.
Sure. What was playtesting like for 10 Candles? I can only imagine when you went through the process of trying to fine tune to the final product that you have now. But what was playtesting like?
Well, there were a lot of iterations. The very first time I played 10 Candles, I ran it for my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife. It's been a journey, right? It's been a fun journey as part of right alongside the game. I played with my girlfriend at the time and her two roommates that she lived with, a husband and wife that she lived with. And at that time, it was basically a one-page write-up. And in that iteration, they all survived at the end. I can officially say they are the only survivors of 10 Candles, because after that I junked that possibility. But it was, so we had kind of a one page, and I knew it was 10 Candles right from the start. Like, that was the name of the game, though it was 1-0 instead of written out. All these random little changes, right? But it was 10 candles. We had the 10 candles. I knew when you started with a pool of 10 dice. I know when the last candle went out, that was the end of the game. And so it kind of started already formed in some ways. There were a huge number of changes that were made over time, but they were all, some of them larger, but most of them pretty small changes that I got through gameplay. The way that character creation worked changed in a pretty huge way, because I was really kind of stumbling around trying to find what kind of worked. And there was a lot of that because this is my first published game. So I didn't have a lot of sort of experience to call upon with, like, where do I even start with a lot of these things? I'm just going to throw ideas down that seem clever and see if they work. And when I was initially designing the game, a lot of what I have come to realize about it with, the emotional sort of structure of the game and things like that, those weren't really as heavily on my mind. I knew I wanted some of that, but I didn't have words to describe it even back then because I was all very fresh to me. But playtesting went for about 3 to 4 years, and which sounds like a lot, but they were fairly few and far between. I kind of had to scramble to get people to play whenever I could, and some of them went well, some of them went really poorly. And one of the biggest, to my memory, one of the largest issues that game had for a really long time was pacing. And pacing's really important in this game because you really want to have the feeling of, when you have a time limit, you need to make sure that time limit works well and is effective. And the rules were structured at the time where candles, it was pretty darn hard to darken candles originally. You could willingly darken one if you wanted to, like, succeed at a task you had failed at, or you could, or you would have to darken one if you failed a conflict, just like today. But failing was much trickier, and you basically only lost dice when you used cards. It was a mess of pacing, and I didn't know what to do to fix it because everything seemed, like with many designers, everything seemed great. I just people aren't rolling well, and I blamed it on people rolling dice really well instead of rolling poorly, so I could make them fail. I think originally it was even something as horrible as, like, when you failed a conflict, you lost a die from the pool, and you needed to lose all the dice from the pool in order to darken a candle. It was a mess. Ooh, But what the breakthrough came with, what would happen if just whenever you failed a roll, a candle went out? And then that sort of grew into, well, what would happen if you lost your ones when you rolled them? And those two innovations sort of completely fixed the pacing issues. It was like I was being way too generous with how often with how slowly the game went. And as soon as I made it, well, ones are lost, and whenever you fail, boom, candle gone. Suddenly it just worked really, really well. And whereas previously the game really relied on the candles just sort of going out on their own at the end, which was thematic and great, now that happens like 25% of the time, and the other 75% of the time you'll end the game because of die rolls and because of action the players are taking. Go figure, people like to have actions influence the outcome of things. So, so there were some things like that were bigger changes that fixed major issues that I had that I just couldn't even identify originally. And there were some smaller ones. There was, I didn't really know what I wanted Hope Dice to do originally. Like I had the idea that maybe they couldn't be lost, or that it was just an extra die to roll, which isn't all that exciting. And then as a result of one of my playtests, a playtester that I ran the game for said, what if they succeeded on 5s and 6s? And I'm like, that's brilliant. I'm going to write that down. And that made it into the game. Sure. So, it was a lot of people being very open-minded, and a lot of people, sometimes being less open-minded and not really, I had a lot of people who didn't get it. And I think a lot of that was because I didn't know how to explain it originally. Sure. I had this idea, and I'm like, this idea works in my brain for so many reasons. But with something like that, when it's a little more experimental, it's a little more unlike what people expect. If you can't really give it a good intro, if you can't give it a good pitch, and it's just like, no, you're going to die at the end, it's fine. People don't really understand why they're sitting down to play the game in the first place.
Sure.
So a lot of the playtesting sort of boiled down to some big changes, a lot of little ones, a lot of working on things like pacing and boiling down 6 or 7 different mechanics into 1 or 2 mechanics that accomplished all of the things, and just sort of learning how to talk about my game. Like that was a big part of it, was kind of finding what is the spirit of this game? What is this game really trying to do? What does it do really well? And how can I talk about that to people effectively and explain it in a way that makes sense? And even now I look back at my original Kickstarter video and I'm like, I don't even think I really had the pitch down then. But thankfully, 500 some odd people were very patient with me, and were willing to support it. So now it's a thing.
Nice. And and quite a thing it is. One last question.
Sure.
And that is, I think one of the coolest things about the game is that after you've created your character, everybody that is playing records like the final message for somebody that finds that recorder or whatever. They record that, and then at the end of the game, all the candles are out, everybody's gone, and then you play that final message. When you run the game, or when you have run the game and you play that, what kind of effect does that have in the room and on the players typically?
God, I mean, that's the game. Like that's 10 Candles to me. Those 2 moments, and that's one of those. And I even basically say that in the rules. I'm very candid in that section with the GMs. I'm like, this is the most important thing, because that's the game to me. I think that's one that I think is the one mechanic in the game, the one thing that's in there that has no mechanical influence whatsoever. There's nothing that has to do with dice rolling. There's no part of that has any effect on the game, mechanically speaking. It is purely there because it is emotionally required for the game. And you can take the rest of the game out and look at it as a study of like how can we have a group of people make a recording and then listen to that recording 4 hours later and actually care about it? What can we put in the middle to make that happen? And that sort of is the game. So to answer your question, maybe a little less vaguely, I find that the emotional impact is all 100% of the time very, very powerful and profound, because there is this very interesting aspect of that where I have the final recording essentially be the very first words your characters speak ever. Because there's no, you're making your characters, The GM shuts the lights off, the candles are lit, they give the rereading of the module and immediately hand you the recorder, and that's your intro. That's the character's very first words. And, you know, to look at this from a little bit of a meta standpoint, you know, characters in RPGs, especially one-shots, are very finite things, right? They exist, they're living, they're having experiences so long as we are around a table talking about them and sharing those experiences, right? They are very ethereal and fascinating things, these characters we play in role-playing games, because they're very limited, very finite existences that we give power, and that's why tabletop games are awesome, right? And so I've always thought, you know, whenever I play a D&D game, I put an exceptionally large amount of thought into what I want my character's first words to be, because I've always been fascinated with beginnings and endings, and I think that they're very important, those kind of bookends that you have on a game experience. And having that kind of be the very first things your characters say, I think is really important. And it also throws you into game. It's immediately telling you as a player, you know, this isn't just a game where you're being like, oh, I walked to the tavern. Like, nope, we're actually LARPing right now for 5 seconds. And I'm going to hand you a thing. And you're going to speak as your character. You're not going to say you roll a diplomacy check. You're not going to say, oh, my character says something about this. You're going to say it. And immediately you are your character. And that's the first step you need. That is the jumping in at the deep end that I feel like, hey guys, this is a one shot. There's no time to talk about what your character's wearing. You are your character, go. Right? This is how this game works. This is how this story works. And then you shut that off, and the GM tucks it in their pocket, and you launch into a traditional role-playing game. But you are your character. You know it right from the beginning. You know that you're going to be put on the spot, and you know you have been required to sum up your character's most important words they want to leave behind to the world in 5 seconds with no other interactions before then. And then to have that story, and to have that story end the way 10 Candles ends, and to have undoubtedly an emotional experience, or at least a powerful one, as dictated by the arcs that are built into the game, and have your characters meet their end, characters that you didn't even know existed until 4 or 5 hours ago, to then go back right after that story is done and listen right after speaking their final words, to go back and listen to the very first ones they ever spoke, is, I think, really, really cool. And I have had so many sessions where people have been very strongly emotionally impacted by it. You know, I've had people start crying. I've had people get, just stunned silence around the table. I've had people laughing but like that sort of very emotional, because you're hearing someone maybe joke about something that then became so relevant, or talking about a relative that then became an important character in the game that maybe they got away, maybe they didn't. I had to share a very brief story. One of my sessions of 10 Candles that I ran when I was playtesting the game, just as an example of this, one of the characters had built themselves as a bartender, and they were the local bartender, and they were, just sort of hamming it up on their recording, like, oh, we're going to keep the pub closed down until this all clears up, but don't worry, you can get back to your drinking soon. We'll all be there to open it up again and close down the bar together. And hey guys, next drink's on me. Right? And that was the end of the recording. And we promptly forgot about that forever, until the end of the campaign, where we have this bartender character, and one other character back to back, standing on a highway, fog's rolling in, monsters are surrounding them, closing in on them and their car. Everyone else is dead. Their lights are going dark. And the gentleman who's playing the bartender, a good friend of mine, Brandon, describes how he sort of shoulders off his backpack, pulls out a flask of whiskey that he'd saved from under the bar, passes it to his friend. He takes a drink. They like basically clink glasses on the road, and we fade to black on the story. None of us remembered. But as soon as he says, next drink's on me, it was incredible. It was an incredible moment where there was laughter, but there was also just like, oh my God, like, this is way too much to even process right now, because for that moment, they felt real. Like that was the end of the arc. That was that story. And that was the entire game, was that exact moment leading up to that moment.
And you just talking about that, I got goosebumps right now.
I'm getting remembering it, right? Because it's sitting in a pitch black room and having that moment, and that is not just a singular scenario. That happens every time I play the game, and I hear people saying, you know, we had the recording played and people went nuts because it was so. Because a lot of the time, what a GM hears with you making that initial recording, that's going to really influence their play. You really only know the core parts of their character. If you know, oh, my sister's missing, I'm going to mention my sister in the recording. And if that sister's important to you, you can be sure as shit that sister's going to show up. And either amazing or horrible things are going to happen. And either way, they're going to have had a part in that story that then you're going to hear that on the recording, and it's going to be emotionally dramatic. And it's going to just put that capstone on your experience sitting in just pitch black, listening to that. So I think is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite component of the entire game. And it's the only one that has no mechanical bearing, but it's so emotionally significant to the whole experience. Like that, that's what makes the game.
I am so looking forward to the opportunity to actually run this for a group of people.
Yes.
I actually last summer, I got like a Tascam digital recorder, and I haven't used it yet. So I have like a nice recorder that we can pass around the table. Everybody gets their last message. I'm really pumped to do this. So
when am I coming up?
Dude, you are so invited when I do it. And we will make that happen. It'll probably end up being at the Benton's house, because they have the space for us. So, no, it's going to happen. And to the folks who are watching us on YouTube and listening to us, you really need to check out 10 Candles. Where can people get 10 Candles?
So you can get 10 Candles at my website, cavalrygames.com, or just cavalry.games. And you can get it there, PDF, softcover, or a bundle of each, whatever you'd prefer. But it's all available right through my website.
And I can't remember where I think I just did a Google search for 10 Candles, and I found the website, and I just.
Yeah, I think if you do a Google search for 10 Candles, TEN Candles, it should likely be the first one that pops up. Sometimes Yankee Candles has a 10 Candles for 2 sale, and they might outpace me in popularity on like Twitter, but normally it's the first one that should pop up.
And we'll have a link in the show notes, so people can check that out and pick up their copy. And the artwork on the website is beautiful too. It shows like essentially a possible scenario for the end of the world, but I just love that the group of survivors are all kind of back to back, and they've got their flashlights out, and they're, you know, obviously some of them are looking kind of afraid, and trying to figure out what's coming for them. And you get to see some of the faces of these creatures for this particular scenario, with saliva drooling right out of the mouth there. It's pretty awesome. So
I worked with a guy by the name of J Circle, and he did some amazing stuff for the cover art, so I'm very thankful to him for that. It turned out way better than I could have ever imagined.
So yeah, quite honestly, if you're looking for a new and different kind of RPG experience, definitely go to cavalrygames.com and get your copy of
If you want to, if you also, I just, if you don't mind, my also plugging my Patreon.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm here. If you like 10 Candles, maybe you already play it. I also do have a Patreon. So once you have backed the Adventure Party Patreon, priority number 1, you can also check out mine. It's patreon.com/Stephen Dewey. Just mine first and last name all together. And that's where I am sort of building funds towards other game projects that I'm working on, future games, future Kickstarters. 10 Candles was the first, but definitely not last game I'm looking to put out there. And I have hopes of doing another Kickstarter at some point later this year for my second game. So all of that info you can find on my Patreon, and all the news you can get through there. Or you can follow me on Twitter at ShiftyGinger. You can find me on there as well.
Nice.
I always get a kick out of that.
As well you should. Shifty Ginger. And just for point of reference, Stephen has quite a shock of red hair, which is truly magnificent. Okay, so we'll have these different contact points, cavalrygames.com, your Patreon, and your Twitter listed on YouTube, and when we put out the audio version of this particular meeting of Adventure Party.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I think we're going to start to wrap things up here and let you know if you'd like to chat with the hosts or other listeners of this Galactic Network podcast, or some of the other shows that we have, like Alien Invasion, Podcast of Terror, Who Knew and Reviews, and a number of other shows that we have 24 hours a day. We can make that claim because Daryl Johnston, who does Who Knew and Reviews and Sci-Fi Survival Guide. Am I misremembering that? Boy, I feel like an ass. I'm sorry, Daryl. My brain's starting to turn off at this point. He lives in the UK. He's 6 hours in the future. So there's somebody pretty much on our Galactic Network podcasts Slack channel all day long. You can go to gncasts.com/signup, and we'll add you to our Slack team, so you'll have the ability to interact with us in real time. Again, you can go to gncasts.com/signup. For more on this podcast, including show notes, contact information, and more, you can go to gncasts.com/adventure. If you have a question or comment about anything you've heard on this Galactic Network podcast, you can email. God, I do that every time. That I need to change the wording on that. That is utter crap. You can contact us at adventure@gncasts.com, and I think I said this last week. I was going to rewrite that, and I obviously didn't. Say, we have a voicemail system where you can call us at 805-328-3966. Again, 805-328-3966. Or you can go to gncasts.com/contact. We read, listen, and appreciate all of your feedback. And we have a section in the show where if we get feedback, we talk about it. What you have to say and answer your questions, or if it's a comment on a previous episode, we remind everybody what that episode was about and go over what you have to say. Please subscribe to this Galactic Network podcast by going to gncasts.com/subscribe, or you can search for us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, or anywhere podcasts are offered. So again, Stephen, I really want to thank you for your time. Good Lord, we've been talking for about 2 hours now. I apologize for this going so long, but the conversation about 10 Candles is so engaging, the thought process, and I don't think that we've really ever talked about the choices that you make to get people emotionally invested in a game. So I think that portion of this conversation alone is gold, and I'm glad that we had that, because it's something that you don't think about, and I think that we take for granted. you don't know how the sausage is made, and it's cool to have somebody go, hey, this is a factor too. So people who are listening to this who maybe are designing their own RPG system, they've got something else to think about as a way to hook people in emotionally. So thank you very much for making us think about that, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was great to talk about.
Absolutely. And quite honestly, if you have another project, please give us a shout, because we'd love to talk to you again.
Definitely will do. I'm sure I'm going to have some this year, so I'll let you know.
Excellent. Excellent. I want to thank Glenn for once again joining us on this journey. Where can people find out more about you, what you do, and Mistrunner?
You can find out more about me on Facebook with Mistrunner the RPG, mistrunner.com. Check out my other stuff with the People We Bunker on YouTube, also Astro Radio Z, and the Spoiler Room and the Film Jerks, and I do too many things. Or easiest, just follow me on Twitter at Guy in a Bunker.
It's hard to believe that you have a day job as a manager of a game store in all that listing of stuff that you do. As we like to say in certain circles, Glenn is the BFD, the big fucking deal, because he wears many hats. So there you go. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us on the Adventure Party. Normally I say, may your characters never die and your adventures always be epic. But you know what? Sometimes your characters are going to die. And in the process, you make an epic story. So thank you for listening, and good night.